welcome and hello everyone who has had the chance to come here, and thank you for the participants and peers here with me on the stage as well. I will just give a very quick introduction, but later you will have time to introduce yourself. Next to me here is Borka, and then Maud and Antoine from Domingo Club. Welcome everyone for this session today at the Maker Faire about distributed design. I'm pretty sure that I might be preaching to the choir here when we're talking about distributed design, but however, let's talk about it anyways, with a bit of a background. And I would just like to invite you to join me on a little journey here. So if there's any questions, we will address them in the end of the talk. Let's just go straight ahead. I always like to refer at the start when talking about design and about making to one of my favorite authors, who is Sennett. And while he has written some really amazing books, for example, The Craftsman and Together, The Rituals and Politics about Collaboration, I do not always agree with how he names things. So from The Craftsman, maybe we could rather choose craftspeople. However, I do agree with many things that he says in his books. So for example, he has elaborated on how the workshop has actually enabled collaboration, and that through the workshop we were able to innovate in what we do and what products we have. So for example, way in the past, if you would have a workshop that will be mostly driven by guilds, so around a specific topic or area material, for example, only about metal, or only about wood manufacturing or glass manufacturing. But at one point, there was a moment where people from different kinds of workshops have come together and started collaborating and thinking together about new innovative ideas. So for example, the telescope has been able to be produced and made because two very creative minds from two different types of workshops, in this case metal and glass, have come together and had this idea. So there's another important piece in history which has been quite interesting for the development of design or how we make today, and this is the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was a design and art school in Germany, where I'm from, which was established between 1919 and 1933 by a person called Walter Gropius in Weimar. Important figures, for example, Wassily Kandinsky and Mies van der Rohe, are some of the people who have come out of the Bauhaus or have been teaching at the Bauhaus. We know Mies van der Rohe, for example, from the pavilion that we have here in Barcelona at Montjuic. And Walter Gropius' idea was to create a Gesamtkunstwerk. Translated, that means a comprehensive artwork. With this, he wanted to drive that design, architecture, and art is coming together and unifying how we produce things, so how we can mass produce actually products. So this was his basic idea, and he was him and some other designers from back then were having a huge impact in how we think about modern design and how we think about architecture, and actually has quite a big of influence on how we teach art and design and architecture until today. You see here one of the examples from one of the drawings from the Bauhaus school, where it exemplifies a bit the structure of how they teach design. So they start with everyone coming into the class and everyone learns the ground principles. And now obviously saying this, that comes really natural and really logical for us, but only because we're already being taught the ground principles when we come to design and learn to design. And afterwards you would learn furthermore different types of crafts, and everyone would learn every craft basically. So that's really interesting, because what they were wanting to do is that anyone would be able to do anything. So that's why everyone had the classes about metal, glass, photography. And Walter Gropius was quite influential in his work and influenced and inspired many other people to take these ideas to other schools and universities beyond Germany. So some of the designers, architects that have studied there has taken these ideas, for example, to United States, to Boston, which was then the Institute for Design in Boston, where Moholy Naj has taught similar these principles to his students. And the new Bauhaus is actually not something that has passed away and is silently just in the background of our work, but until today it has quite some influence. So for example, the European Union is looking into now how the new European Bauhaus might have an impact and can influence what role design and architecture can play in a fair society and an inclusive society looking to a more sustainable future. So these are also some works that are coming out of the Bauhaus that some people might know. So how does this connect to today? As I mentioned before, we're talking about distributed design. Distributed design was established in 2017. It's a co-founded project with Creative Europe. It's a program from the European Union. And it is established together with members all around Europe. And these members are from very different cultural backgrounds. They are from Fab Labs, they are maker spaces, they are cultural institutions or museums. And it has been in the past, for the last 4 years, creating opportunities for emerging talents to support them to reach the market or to show their work, to display their work. And what I would like to actually mention is that distributed design is more than just a platform, a website on which you can find emerging talents, but actually distributed design is a framework for collaborative, open, equitable, and sustainable design. So emerging at this intersection between the maker movement or making itself and design sensibility is distributed design as to advocate sustainable, inclusive, and collaborative practices for a proactive response to today's challenges. And we're aiming really for an alternative design culture with that. So the distributed design can be seen as a mindset or a practice to challenge for global challenges. And we're looking forward to shift the existing paradigm to connect globally and to produce locally, where bits travel globally, where atoms stay local. And I think you might have heard about this before in the last few days. So we'll not go into this topic. It is a video, but this can just play in the background. Oh, that's fine. I'm just going to go to the next one. So how we make, as I mentioned, and how we design has changed quite a bit over the last few years. Over the last few years is good. The workshop looks quite different today. So if you're here with me today at Fab Lab Barcelona, you will see that there are different types of machines than 100 years ago. And this is basically because the Industry 4.0 revolution has consistently developed and reshaped how we make. This can take shape in microfactories or flexible factories or, for example, in maker spaces and Fab Labs. This opportunity has shifted us and shifted the way we make from maybe more outdated mass production means and reimagined very practically new global supply chain. And this is one of the things we have seen specifically in the last years with the global COVID-19 pandemic. So in 2005, Professor Neil Garrisonfield from the MIT Center for Bits and Atoms has predicted this rise of the Fab Labs, of these fabrication laboratories. And yeah, actually you see here in the back, there's Antoine. One of the, he has predicted the rise of fabrication laboratories. A fabrication laboratory essentially is a space that makes digital fabrication accessible, and that is in terms of CNC machines or 3D printing. And subsequently, also there was an increase of facilities in general to materialize the digital and turn data into things and things into data. So how does Fab Cities, Fab Labs, and distributed design all come together here? Since 2005, since Neil Garrisonfield had this idea, there's over 1,800 Fab Labs in over 100 countries around the globe. And alongside with this, not only Fab Labs open, but also maker spaces and hacker spaces. And distributed design was really enabled by this. And three main digital revolutions, which we can see as communications, so the internet, how we communicate globally, computations in terms of smartphones, computers, and fabrication, so 3D printing, CNC manufacturing, everything what I mentioned before. And this digital revolution has enabled an environment in which distributed design was able to seed, but really able to flourish with the trend of the maker movement and the digitalization of the design discipline. This convergence has led to a new exploration of design in which creative individuals have access to digital tools to produce, design, and make basically almost anything anywhere while they share on a global scale. How does distributed design then take shape? As I was mentioning before, this opportunity has shifted how we produce and manufacture towards a more decentralized mechanism driven by regenerative practices. And what then happens is that we are able to gather globally via this digital layer, and we are all connected through the digital layer and really fueled by our curiosity. So emerging after that, when we are connected and we can exchange our thoughts, is more localized and situated design ideas and approaches in which we are staying connected over a distance to share knowledge and expertises, open source practices, and then are able to materialize them in our areas. And the really interesting part of this is that out of these group of people who are in the making discipline, there are some of these creatives who are coming out and they really have the need and the idea to reduce the planetary impact, to reduce inequalities that are existing between population and cultures. So this digital layer, as I was mentioning, is opening doors to digitalized making, in which we can use new types and tools for platforms that augment the limits in physical design. This approach also, as I mentioned before, aids hyper-local customization. So for example, if you take one of these designs that you find online, you can really customize them to your local context. Then your users' needs can be addressed through diversity in materials and diversity of techniques and voices and crafts. And it serves an opportunity to also open access information and education for capacity building and basically for self-development as well, as many of these tools and resources which are online are very much self-explanatory. Anyone has access to those potentially and learn through those. And to make sure that I'm not the only person talking here, I will give in a moment the microphone to some other people who are with me here on the stage. One thing I would like to share before that is that one important characteristic of distributed design is that it's not one traditional field of design, like industrial design or communication design or similar. It can be more defined by its process or its attitude and its values. And we are, as members from distributed design or people who practice distributed design, continuously learning through this and further elaborating on this approach, learning through what we're doing. However, values such as open, collaborative, sustainable, regenerative are some of the things that we really try to further work on and define in the progress. So now, without further ado, I would like to invite Borka to talk about her project. Borka is now an alumni since a few days. Exactly. She was part of the Master for Design and Emergent Futures, one of the master programs that we have here. And she has received the distributed design scholarship to attend this master, and she will show her project.
I will, yes.
I will pass you on the magic stick.
Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. And I will just strengthen everything you said about distributed design by showing my project connected to distributed design and doing my MDF project as a scholar at MDF, as a scholar of distributed design. platform. So distributed design platform coming here empowered me to take forward my research project and to implement it through the academic year of MDF, which is Master in Design for Emergent Futures, but I did a distributed design project. My objective for the graduate studies when coming here was focusing on participatory planning methods, and I was mostly interested in how can we integrate design thinking into educational systems to educate kids to be able to form their own future by involving some decision makers in common thinking and planning. So I was always focused on co-creational and participatory methods. When coming here to MDF and when starting to collaborate with other classmates who are coming from many different countries and many different disciplines, I was particularly interested in the intersection of behavioral science, education, and urban planning from a perspective of product designer. But we had all these courses. We had courses in robotics, in biology, everything, but I always had to keep my perspective as a product designer or maker to accomplish my research ideas. Just as an addition to the introduction, that I came from Budapest, from the Fab Lab Budapest, as a member of them and as a participant of Open Call for Ideas, which was an open call in collaboration with Distributed Design Platform in Budapest, and I could take my ideas forward here in Barcelona at the Fab Lab Barcelona. So through this year, we had many opportunities to approach our research interest through very, very different courses, how I said before. I had opportunities to do design interventions, design research and exploration at our design studios, which was kind of like the most theoretical class of us that was following through our whole process through the 3 trimesters. I will just say some words about it. One of the most important intervention I could do was happening in Poblano in the super years. It was an empathy workshop about biodiversity in urban spaces, where we were collaborating with local schools and the teachers and the parents, and we were kind of like redesigning the super years or redesigning our urban environments for different agents. That's not just us, and that's not just the people who super year was built for. So we continued these workshops through the whole year, and we had co-creational and participatory workshops. Later on, how Jess already talked about the Fab academic courses. We were also part of the Fab academic courses as MDF students, and we had opportunities to implement our ideas through fabrication, coding, and electronics, and create some kind of artifacts which can be an aid for our research projects later on. And just as an example, one of them was this wheel, the lighting ball. This is a ball which kind of helps us to show the kids' hate and sensitivity in their environments. By moving around in the space, this ball draws out the kids' movement on a live screen, how they move around and how they interact with the built environment. It also has some different kind of materials in the balls with sensors. So when kids are moving around, they are touching these materials, and it shows what kind of materials, how do they interact with in the spaces. We were also able to create participatory board games and moving games for kids, and we were always taking it to the public and interacted with our communities to play with it. And what was the most important, that through this year we could really, really build up a local community. So who I was working the most with, it was the local Montessori school. And I had a whole trimester of participatory workshop sessions with them. And based on these workshop series, I was kind of able to build up my final project and my MDF Fest event, which is the closing event of our whole master course. But I would say it's not a final project. It's kind of like a touch point in the project I'm gonna continue from now on with the community who I already started working with. And the artifact which was brought here by them is Crosshabit, called Crosshabit. And Crosshabit is a participatory game and a collection of distributed participatory methods empowering children's decision making and the agency of their impacts of decisions, while it tries to raise awareness about the right of freedom and the right of expression for adults of children. So it also tries to examine the effect of the built environment on the youngest generation and their effect on their own built environment, and creates a kind of dialogue about the emergent topics we are talking through our MDF course here. And I want to use this opportunity as well to say thank you for Distributed Design Platform for enabling me to create me this opportunity of becoming a part of MDF and the Fab Lab team, which really gave me new perspectives through all of our courses and enabled us to talk about the topics I really felt like to talk about, like helping the next generations, or talk about the systems we live in, or talk about the future cities. And from this point, I have the community and I have the people to actually move forward with from this point. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Borka.
I would give back the word and if you want.
No worries. Thank you so much for sharing your project with us. It was super interesting to hear. I will move along. There's also a video. I will move along and introduce really briefly Maud and Antoine, but I think you can introduce yourself in more detail afterwards. So Maud and Antoine are two of the emergent talents, or actually in the framework of Domingo Club, one of the emergent talents that we have received the awards for an excellent project last year from Distributed Design. And it's really nice that you're still around in Barcelona, so we are able to invite you and to talk about your project. So please talk about your project, explain us what you've done in the last years.
Yes.
The magic device.
We won't play this video, should we? Because we have participated to Distributed Design Awards like 1 year ago, and we won the first prize, which was like very empowering for us because we just started this project and it was like relevant for us. As well, we also participated to Food Shift, like an incubation program of 8 months in Fab Lab Barcelona as well. So it's why this video is here. Okay. Well, so what we want to do in our work. So we want to team up with mushroom to ferment protein-rich superfood, which is called tempeh. So we want to join food and design in a way. And we do that because we think that food has a real impact on the climate crisis we are, and that we can change our consumption habits. And it can start, and it should start with food. So our solution is more.
So we decide to focus on food and to use our design skills for food future to shift towards a plant-based diet and to invite other people to have this opportunity to start to produce their protein at home instead of getting protein from meat, and to be able to decentralize the fabrication of food, to be more conscious of where the food comes from, and to gain an interest that we have lost in the last generation.
to work locally also with like locally products.
Yeah. And all this to guarantee that we have all access to good food, which is healthy, sane, secure, that we can have towards in the next years, in the next decades that are coming. One good solution already exists from 500 years and has been discovered in Indonesia is tempeh. Tempeh, the fermentation of tempeh is a mix of legumes, of beans. There they use soy. Here we can use other beans such as chickpea, lentils, like other legumes that we have access to in the local level. And so a combination of beans and of a mushroom, the rhizopus, it's its name. And the mushroom grows around the beans and pre-digests the proteins that the beans already contain and make them accessible for our bodies to absorb them all. So that makes 100 grams of tempeh, well, let's say 20% of tempeh is protein. And that's the same level as we have in meat, for instance. Which is very interesting is that we can make that with different type of beans. So far we have more than 20 beans all around the globe that we can use to make tempeh with. There is one in Mexico that we cannot digest because it's toxic, and they used to cook it 7 times to make it accessible, but with tempeh fermentation, after 1 cooking time and 1 fermentation, you can eat it already. So that can give access to forgotten beans.
So this food comes from Indonesia, and over there it's like very easy to ferment it because Indonesia has a tropical weather which is like humid and hot, like Barcelona, but Barcelona only in summer, not all the year. And so to replicate this climate in other locations and to be able to ferment tempeh, we need to use other kind of technologies that we have access now thanks to Fab Labs and other education and technology education areas. So basically, this is the few components we use in our product, in our fermenter to recreate the Indonesian weather and to be able to ferment the tempeh locally.
So our mission is to build the tools. So a fermenter that we'll discover in the next slide. A fermenter so the tools that can give access to good food for everyone. And so we do that with the distributed design principles in mind, with the digital manufacturing in mind. Like how can we choose very basic component that we can all understand, repair, improve, and share, and using the techniques that we can all use in the different Fab Labs in Makerspace. So this is the fermenter, the product that we are designing to try to simulate this Indonesian climate in the box.
It's the new design. You can see the old, or the not that old, but another design just next to, like the wooden box, not the black box.
Yeah. So far we have like 2 versions. The big one that we see only like a tiny bit on the side is like the lab version, like a bigger one where we can not only grow tempeh. Tempeh is made with mycelium, the roots of the mushroom. And the mycelium, we can eat it, but we can also make other kind of material and invest it for design stuff. And so the big fermenter is made for that, and the small one is, we see it in the kitchen to make your food that you eat every day.
Yeah, so basically this box just maintains the constant temperature of in between 27 and 30 degree to 32 degree for 30 hours only to ferment the tempeh. So it's quite a quick fermentation process, which is interesting also. If you want to start with fermentation, it could be like a good start because it's quick and you see the result and it's delicious. So how to make tempeh? You have to cook your beans and add the spores of the mushroom, which is like little powder. Here, if you look well, you can even see some of the spores that are already inside
the white dots.
the white dots. And what happens is that after 30 hours, the spores of the mushroom will grow to create the roots the mycelium, and will grow all around the beans that create this block of tempeh. And so here the tempeh is in the petri dishes, so in the glass mold. So it's cool because you can see the evolution during the fermentation process, but it can be made in any kind of mold. Like traditionally, it's made in the banana leaves in Indonesia.
More tempeh.
More
image.
tempeh. Never enough tempeh.
We love tempeh. The rest is also
Fresh and beautiful
which is
tempeh.
fun is that you can really see the transformation from the beans to the tempeh, where the block is becoming compact and firm and has a texture. When you slice it, you can see the beans and the mycelium network growing around it.
Everybody says that it looks like turun here. It looks like turun, no? But it has a completely different texture and different taste. It's a lot of people compare it to tofu, but it has like a more like chewy texture than tofu and way more taste as well, because tofu doesn't have so much taste. You have to give the taste to the tofu. And here, thanks to the mycelium and the beans that are inside, you have already this taste and texture.
To make the difference, tofu is not fermented and is made with soy milk, and tempeh is fermented and made with the beans themselves. Not only the milk that we extract from the beans, but the beans. And so we get all the nutrients that the bean has.
And after you just cook it as tofu or a piece of meat, like you put it in a pan, you put it in the oven, you do a marinade, you put it in any kind of dish you already love to eat, and you will even love it more.
And so our mission is to make the tool, the fermenter that you have seen, to make the food that you have seen also, and to make this available for everyone, trying to build a community around it, trying to focus on very simple components that are accessible and that we can share, focus on the workshops that are already available to start to produce this fermenter, to start to make it grow around us, and to open it as much as we can so then everyone can understand it, enter it, improve it, and participate in the movement, to take action into it also. Yeah.
Yeah, to have like little step by little step and make like a big step all together.
And I think also like just before this, like we choose to work on food because food is very inviting for people, and too often in the design problems that we may have, we need like more public to be there. We need like an invitation to participate all together. And food is always like a good gathering. Like now we don't have tempeh with us, it's a shame. But like the best way to taste it, to try it, to participate in it is just to eat it and to have the sensation in your mouth. And that's something very direct that we can bring with design and with distributed design, but also just with food and just being together.
Amazing. Thank you
So
very
that's
much.
us.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Maud and Antoine, also for sharing your work.
Thank you.
I love the tempeh, by the way. I think I'm one of the fans over here. Before we close up the session about distributed design, I wanted to share some of the ideas that have been emerging in the last distributed design book. Actually, I'm going to show it really quick. You can see mine is quite well worn already because I love to read up on it every now and then. And I was skipping through this book and wanted to highlight some of the ideas from the distributed design community to show where distributed design may move towards. But these are simple ideas and not concrete directions, obviously. So please bear with me if we're not going to work directly on one of these topics. So one of the things that have been mentioned, I'm going to showcase them together, actually, in this case, because I have one really nice project that's going to showcase both planetary design and extended design in one. So what do we think about planetary design? And I'm referring here to some of the abstracts I've been reading in the distributed design book, is that design is not only about creating the present realities and what we are immersed in right now, but it is everything basically that we're doing today is inherently intertwined what is going to happen tomorrow, or what is yet to come. So the physical objects that we hold today, such as a fermenter or this little object we're using here for the presentation, has some kind of impact, if that may be negative or positive. So when we make our design decisions, we have to be aware of that these have economic, social, ecologic, and geological changes on a planetary scale. And I like to refer here to one of the topics which is called reciprocity. So when we normally extract materials as a human being from the earth, we think only in one way. So we extract a material and we make products for us. However, when we think maybe on a more planetary design thinking scale, then we maybe think about an equal value exchange. So when we take something, what can we equally give back? And I believe that we can test this out within today and also in the future through iterating our design interventions in real life context and understanding the communities, the impact that we have, and really create somewhat of a global pathway. We can create somewhat of a pathway towards a more regenerative, a more caring, and maybe more equitable and fair global economy. Because being a designer really means having a responsibility towards the society and towards the ecosystem we live in, and hence the idea of having more planetary approach when we think about design. And before I move to the project that I would like to showcase, which is out of the book, I'm also going to talk really briefly about extended design, so this digital sphere from design. Extended design, or any digital spheres for design, is basically a new playground for us as designers to emerge in with new explorations like NFTs, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And they're creating somewhat of fluid spaces for us to spark our creativity, to indulge in our creativity in there. Extended design also can create new realities in which we can have access to distributed design principles. We have, for example, we can visualize spaces that we might not be in right now, or equipment or practices. We can really, for example, work on a hypothesis how a circular project could work through for like a process shown in a digital sphere to understand and reduce errors while we then afterwards produce it in an actual world. So distributed design in connection with extended design could empower designers and understand the impact before they're actually moving towards producing the project itself. However, these, such as NFTs, artificial intelligence, are still yet to be explored, because there are terms in terms of accessibility and impact, some of the factors we do not know 100% yet, or yet to be explored. So the project that I'm going to show is one from EcoStream. This is actually taking place in India. And EcoStream has worked together with a local community in Tibet to understand the global challenges and the global impact that this climate crisis has in Tibet. So they're working together with the community, because the community, the people that are living in Tibet, they see what is happening. They see that the river flows are different. There's more droughts. There's more heavy rainy seasons. However, sometimes they're lacking the means to communicate this from one community to another community that lives maybe in a different area of Tibet. This specific project is not only for supporting together with the community this knowledge exchange on a local scale, but also for the people who are visiting Tibet. So this is an augmented reality project in which they showcase the climate impact on the Tibet area specifically. And I think this is a really nice project because it's working with the indigenous knowledge of the area and connecting it in an informative way to also the touristic area, which is a part of Tibet's day-to-day reality, let's say it like that. And if you would like to know more about this, actually I would recommend to read up on the article that is available on Distributed Design on the website and the book directly, because it's a really, really interesting project. Lastly, I wanted to talk about intersectional design and equity, and specifically here about equity as a means and not as an end. So I think now more than ever what we've seen in the United States just this week, equity is one of the most crucial things we have to take in mind, and I'm not talking, this this is no news in general, I would say, but it's something that we know for a long time. But something we really should take into consideration when designing. So in the past, design has been highly colonized by certain characteristics of people, by certain people who have the same characteristics. However, in the design sphere, there are quite some more diverse characters, diverse entities who can share their point of view and have valid ideas that need a space to be showcased. So when we're thinking about how we would like to change and how we would like to have an impact with our design solutions, we would have to think that we also have to recognize the inequalities that we're currently facing and really empower these diverse identities to give them agency as well as access to tools such as platforms, such as digital fabrication machines, etc. So this is really tackling the topic of taking action upon these outdated paradigms that we're still living in and building a design building design requirements for future generations and that thrive from our diversity and ideas and the global connections that we have. So distributed design means designing as a democratic, just and conscious tool to empower innovators, creators, citizens, people, anyone, to make their individual but also collective dream to become true. And before wrapping up, I would love to share one of the sentences that Moholy-Nagy, so coming back to the Bauhaus, has shared in the most recent documentary that I've seen. And I think it's very inspiring because he says, when we see design beyond being a discipline, it is not necessarily about the design that we make with our hands, but also what we become while we are designing. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to share this project. Okay. Bueno, are there any questions or anything from the group? If not, we can go to this part which says break. No? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you.